probably will keep Geno Smith, but again, anything could happen in this off-season. But one thing I will give you, Andy, is the fact that you predicted the Bears would have the number 1 overall pick.
That's right, yeah. I think it was 2 and 15 I can see on the list.
Yeah, 2 and 15. For me, I'd go the QB I think will be drafted first. I honestly really wouldn't be surprised if it's Will Levis. I'm thinking.
Do you reckon?
I wouldn't pick him first, but I really wouldn't be surprised. But the only thing that worries me is the accuracy. And it's like, if you're completing 50% of your passes in college, then what are you gonna be like in the NFL? Hello and welcome back to the SJMoores podcast. And today I'm joined again by Andy Davies. How you doing, mate?
I'm very good, mate. Very good. Glad to be on again. How are you, first of all?
I'm great, mate. It's been I was just explaining to you then, it's going to be a busy couple of weeks coming up with loads of Bristol City stuff going on, and obviously the combine and free agency coming up afterwards as well. So I'm going to be working out my head with uni stuff as well. But we'll move. And I mean, thank you for joining me, mate. And I was saying in the last podcast last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry, that we would be having you on to basically just recap the entire season and sort of close the season we started with our season preview in September. We're going to be going over the Super Bowl, going over our predictions that we made in September, and some of them are goddamn awful. And then we're also going to be previewing the 2023 off-season, as well as I mentioned, the Combine's coming up, free agency, the draft in April, before we get to the next big season in the NFL in September. We'll start with where we left off in the last podcast, the Super Bowl Challenge competition. Me and Andy are in, as well as 3 other guests I had on the podcast this mini NFL playoff season, and I actually won that by quite a resounding margin as well, because I picked the Chiefs from the very start and didn't change my predictions at all. I just had a feeling that they'd come out on top, and with that I won the competition with 44 points compared to Ollie Darcy on 28, Kyler Sarkozy on 28, Andy yourself on 26, and then Charlie Grace on 24th. So it's everyone else was really tight, but I sort of ran away with it at the end, which it wasn't looking likely in the first couple of weeks. But anyway, with my winning, obviously I said that if anyone else won, I would give them either an NFL themed gift or some money spent on Fanatics. But with my win, I said I'd donate £20 to Cancer Research UK, which is a charity that's really close to my heart. So I have done that. I'll insert the donation on the screen right now. And I think as a win, I feel like any money I can give to charity, I can, I'll do. So and with it being so close to my family and everything like that, it just makes sense to go to Cancer Research UK. But Andy, it was the playoffs in general before we get to the Super Bowl. The wild card round was a bit boring, but the rest of it, an excellent postseason, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually quite enjoyed the wild card, probably more than the rest, because you had the amazing ending to Ravens Bengals, the fumble, and then the sort of the pick six right at the end. You've got obviously our game was obviously heartbreaking for ourselves, but that was a great game. And but I think last season set a bar so high that we can never really recover from that, because the divisional round last year was the best round that I've ever seen in the playoffs. I don't think we'll ever see anything better than that. And I think the whole of the playoffs were last year so good. I think this year was always going to be a bit of a downturn in that. But I still thought there were some great stories. You had obviously the Brock Purdy story getting all the way to the NFC Championship game. Obviously, you had the Eagles making it, the Chiefs winning it despite Mahomes' injury. You had the Giants going far, and I think, and obviously the Jags comeback. So I think there were some great moments, but I think, compared to last year, it's maybe not quite as exciting as that was.
Yeah, and the Super Bowl, on the other hand, was the most entertaining Super Bowl we've had in a very long time. Certainly the last 5, 6, 7 years, going back to the 2016 one with the Patriots Falcons, it's been the best. It was the best one since then by far. And it started off, with opening possession, Jalen Hurts showing, he was ready for the occasion. Which going into the Super Bowl, that was a genuine concern, because the last time he was in a game as big as this, in the national championship game, he got replaced by Tua. So he had a great season. Sort of faltered towards the end after injury, but really, after this game, it basically proved that Jalen Hurts is among the top quarterbacks in the league right now, because he had historic quarterback performance. He had the most rushing touchdowns by a QB in Super Bowl history, 3 in a game. Obviously, he had the passing one as well. And yeah, I mean, what a game from Jalen Hurts, right?
I mean, I want to first of all disagree with the whole Super Bowl take, because I think that look at legacy of the great games. This one, whatever, obviously we'll allude to this later on, but I think this is why, for me, it won't go down as one of the greats purely because of everyone will remember from this game the holding call at the end, and I think that will
Yeah,
sadly take away what was a great game. I think if that wasn't, if that didn't happen in the game, I think this one would be one of the best ever. But I do think that potentially that holding call could affect the legacy when you compare to the likes of Eagles Patriots, Philly Special, Giants Patriots, Giants stop Patriots going 19-0, and I think that sadly the legacy of this game is a bad refereeing call. But Jalen Hurts for me is someone that I think had a lot of people doubting, and I think just like Josh Allen, he got his big weapon like AJ Brown, and he became the quarterback we all thought he would. And so much so that I've done a draft this year already. I'm in a draft already this year,
yeah,
courtesy of Murph, who's been on my podcast a few times. He set up a league where it's 24 hours per pick. There's about 15, 16 players. It's actually quite a cool league because you've got the first, everyone can create a rule. Everyone has to create at least one rule each. Mine, for example, was the first round has to be a kicker. And it goes sort of a randomizer per round. So, like, you could be the fifth pick in the first round, and you could be first pick in the second round, and then you could be 10th pick in the third round. So, anyway, my point is on that is that I picked Jalen Hurts as my quarterback because
yeah.
I think that whilst I picked him because there was no Josh Allen or Mahomes or Burrow available, I think that look at his season overall, and I think that he's certainly a guy. I think with Tom Brady retiring and with Rodgers potentially going to the Jets from the AFC, I think you look at Hurts. I think definitely is by now the best quarterback in the NFC, and I think it's not really that close anymore in the NFC. Jalen Hurts for me, I think, was brilliant. Obviously, I'm aware that it was one season, and we saw Cam Newton have a similar season, and look how his career happened after that. But I think he's got the right team around him, the right organisation. One of the best GMs, in my opinion, Harry Roseman, and I think that overall he's got a great recipe for success, and I think he's at a great organisation. And look at his ability to rush, ability to pass. He can do pretty much both things, and I think that he. I think unlike Lamar Jackson, I think he knows when to run and when to run best. And I think for me, I think he is one of the coolest blokes on planet Earth, let alone the NFL. And I like the way after the game, he came out and said, it's these kind of games that you learn from, where you saw, going back to Cam Newton, you saw him sulk after losing to the Broncos. And I think that I loved his reaction after the game. I loved his character and what he's shown as a league. So, yeah, for me, Jalen Hurts, absolutely brilliant season, and Super Bowl appearance. I think I probably put a second behind Brady when he lost to the Eagles as the second best ever losing quarterback performance in the Super Bowl. I thought he was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, you mentioned it there, and it's a common theme. The Eagles, they absolutely dominated the stat sheet on this game, but the Chiefs were always there. They always hung in there. The Eagles looked like they win it from the first half. They were up by 10, going in to half time. And I mean, Patrick Mahomes, admittedly, he didn't have the best of games. You've seen Patrick Mahomes be way better, and compared to Hurts, he was the second best quarterback in that game. I think the fact that he won Super Bowl MVP is a bit of a farce, but Mahomes is still good. Like ultimately, he had, other than the holding call, he had to play that won them the game to set up in field goal range, and I think what I'm getting to as well is like all the momentum was with Philadelphia the whole game, but because the Chiefs have Mahomes, Kelsey, Andy Reid, they came away with it because admittedly, the holding call from James Bradbury on Juju Smith-Schuster did help, but yeah, the Chiefs, I never thought they were going away at all in this game. They were down by 10, they came back. Mahomes on that ankle, making that scramble for 30 yards, completely untouched to set the team up in field goal range. I mean, yeah, like you mentioned it there, Jalen Hurts' performance, will go down as one of the best losing performances in the Super Bowl. But you just got to admire the way that the Chiefs are always there in a game, and it shows what having a quarterback, a great play caller, and a great weapon can do to a team, right?
Yeah, I think for me the MVP was Andy Reid of this game.
Mm.
I think the play calling, especially the Sky Mort touchdown, and I think the play calling we saw from him was absolutely fantastic. And I think we saw the way the Chiefs came out second half. I think it was just a fantastic coaching job from Andy Reid. I do actually think Mahomes is the right call for MVP because
Mm.
I saw the people were saying Jalen Hurts MVP, but I find it hard to give a losing quarterback the award. And also, everyone forgets he did fumble the ball for a defensive touchdown,
True.
which really on two really that obviously two went obviously one got chalked off,
Mm.
but I think the performance from Mahomes, I think you look at all these great callbacks, you look at all these legendary moments, look at the 93-yard drive from Joe Montana in his legacy, you look at Peyton Manning and how good he was. And, I think every quarterback, in terms of, I think for me personally, he's my top 5 quarterbacks all time. I know you're coming on my podcast to do a top 10 of all
Yes.
time. And spoiler, he is in my top 5 already. I think he's only 27. I think you look back in his career, obviously, you think he's got still a good 10, maybe 12, 15 years left of his career. And I think when you look back in 10 years' time, look at his career, when he retires or when he gets put in the Hall of Fame, they're going to show this game for me because to have the injury he had not only in the divisional round but also Super Bowl, and to come out that second half and perform the way he did and make so many throws where he was clearly in pain, I think it just showed the kind of fighter he is and the tough guy he is. And I think that is a performance that I think we'll look back on in years gone by, and particularly I think the play we'll look back on in years gone by will be that run he made. I think it was like a 20-30 yard gain which got the Chiefs down the field, and I believe that was one which got the winning field goal. And I think that for me, he is the best quarterback in the league right now. I think that it's pretty clear he's number one. I think to do what he did, to be able to come out second half and perform the way he did, and I've spoken many times, I'm a big fan of him, so I'm probably being a bit biased, but overall, I do think that he is someone that I think he deserves everything he gets because I've criticised Joe Burrow for being a bit cocky, but Holmes, prior to the Super Bowl parade, very modest guy, and I don't think really it could happen to a nicer quarterback in the league, and I think that he deserves all the accolades he's getting right now, and that performance for me will go down in history as one of the toughest and bravest performances I've seen from a winning quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're being biased because I think he's a lot of people's favorite quarterbacks to watch just because the way he does things. It's a sidearm throws, the way he can extend out of make anything out of when he's the amount of times he's being sacked, he can complete a 20-yard game for a first down out of nowhere. Like I think it's shows how special Patrick Mahomes is, and I mean the Chiefs now they've won 2 Super Bowls in the 5 years that Mahomes has been a starter. They've been in 3. They could have been in all 5. I would say in the podcast last time, they were a default neutral zone infraction and, bottling the game against the Bengals away from, being in all 5 Super Bowls. They could have quite easily been in the last 5 straight. Yeah, and it really looks like we've got a little bit of a dynasty here, as we had with the Patriots. Certainly where, the Chiefs have always got to be, at least, and I think most people will pick them to be in at least the AFC Championship game until Patrick Mahomes is, probably either showing signs of decline or has to retire because they're that good at the moment, right?
Yeah, you look at I think you look at that contract Mahomes on. I mean, I think the Bills and Bengals for at least the next year are going to be once again battling with the Chiefs. And I think
Mm.
next year could be a year where maybe they don't win it because the Bills and Bengals haven't got to deal with those contracts yet. But I think look at how Mahomes has performed despite getting a new contract, and everyone talks about how the contract is going to affect the team, but he's lost his best receiver and he's made it work with with lesser guys. And I think that not every quarterback can do that. So as good as Burrow and Allen I should say, there's no guarantee they're going to perform better with worse guys. And you've seen Josh Allen how he performed without Stephon Diggs. So I think that when you factor those in, when Josh Allen of his contract he's been given, when that comes into play, and we'll see Joe Burrow get a deal probably this summer or next summer, I think you could potentially see them fall off as well. So I think if that happens as well, I think there's even more chance. Albeit I'm aware that there'll probably be another team in the AFC that comes out of nowhere and starts to develop a team. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the team
Yeah.
in Aqua and Orange. But I think with these teams potentially losing players because of their salary cap issues, I think there is a perfect chance now with the Chiefs. Now they've got that contract already locked in. I think there's every chance that we could see the Chiefs in every AFC title game for the next 10 years. I think the only way you can stop this really is if, we see a big injury to Kelsey, or even more importantly, a big injury to Mahomes. Or I think actually something that's even more important, I think one thing everyone's not really talking about at the moment, I think Andy Reid, he's going to retire at some point, and he's not no spring chicken. He's, in his 70s, 80s, he must be. At some point he's going to go, I've done what I can. I mean, Bill Belichick, I think right now he's coming to the end of his career, and I think that maybe he should have left when Tom Brady did. But at the same time, you look at Andy Reid, not every coach can last that long, and there may be a point where either his health comes into factor, or we just think, you know what, I've done what I kind of want as 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is. When he retires, he might go, you know what, had enough. And we've seen, not every coordinator can do well after, so there's no guarantee his successor is going to be as good. And I think that for me, Andy Reid is a Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer head coach, and I think that I think that's one thing now. I think that'll be more of an effect that in the next year that will hit them more than probably anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the fact that Andy Reid could retire, and that, it is coming. I can see it happening within the next 5 years. I don't think you last longer than that. But the Chiefs they've done so well with the sort of limited weapons they have. They still have Travis Kelce, who's one of the best weapons, but in football. But what Andy Reid did, like you mentioned, to scheme up, the likes of Kadarius Toney. He had a great screen pass for a touchdown. He just literally walked into the end zone, and he'll be a big part of the offense next season as well, because he's got all the talent in the world. He was a first round pick, and he made the game changing punt return as well to get down to the 10, in the Super Bowl as well. Kadarius Toney did, so he's going to be a massive part of their offense. But you got Sky Moore as well. There's a lot of young talent on the Chiefs team, as well as their quarterback. And like you were saying, Mahomes is locked into his 10-year contract now, so they can build around Mahomes again. And it looks like they got like a nice little young core for the next couple of years before they all go on to bigger contracts. Anyway, let's go back to September, just before week 1, where we predicted the season that's just happened. And I mean, to be fair, we did okay, but there are some shouts that they were awful, basically. So let's start with the AFC first, and I'll read through our playoff teams, and then I'll go through a few stinkers we had as well. So our playoff teams, I had the Bills as the number 1 seed at 12-5, but I also had the Ravens at 12-5. Going into the year, I thought it'd be a big prove year for Lamar, and obviously got hurt again, but they were on the way to 12-30 win season, to be fair, before he did. I had the Broncos at 12-5 as a 3 seed, which I was really high on the Broncos, and you were less so much. But I mean, I'm a massive Russell Wilson fan. I just thought everything would click in Denver, and obviously, next year it'll be interesting to see what happens with Sean Payton rather than Nathaniel Hackett. But yeah, and then I had the Colts winning the division of the AFC South at 9-8, because we said in that podcast, I listened to it this morning. We said the AFC South is by far the weakest division in football, and literally any team could win that. I picked the Colts at 9-8, but yeah, and again that one. I mean, they probably could have won the division, but I think they fired Frank Reich a little bit too early. But yeah, the Colts. I think we both had the Colts. Yeah, the Colts 10-7 as well. And then I had the Chiefs wild card 11-6 as the 5th seed, the Chargers 11-6 as the 6th seed, and the Bengals 11-6 as the 7th seed. So I got 5 playoff teams. And Denver and Indianapolis obviously didn't make it. And then I had Miami and Vegas on the outskirts looking in. Miami at 11-6, and the Raiders at 10-7. But I mean, and then you, Andy, you had the Bills, the Ravens, both top 2 seeds like me. You had the Chiefs winning the division at 12-5, so you're right at that one. You also had the Colts, and then your 3 wildcard teams were the Bengals, Chargers, and Titans. So you missed 2 teams there, so you did all right picking. But again, it changes every year. The different teams and always things that surprise us. And well, we both had the Jags as the second worst team in the in the AFC. I had them at 4-13. You had them at 5-12. And I mean, God, it's. We didn't know how good Trevor Lawrence was going to be. We didn't know, obviously, how good Doug Peterson would be, in his first job since Philadelphia. And I mean, the Jags, I mean, we said we could pick 3 surprises, 3 disappointments for this one. The Jags are not one of my surprises straight away, just because, they made the playoffs in a year where they quite rightly had, bottom 5, bottom 10 roster in the NFL. And, fair play to them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they got a bit lucky. I think I'm all for praising Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence improved massively. I think Doug Peterson did a great job to get in the playoffs and to have that comeback win. But at the same time, the Titans were 7-3, and the Jags were, I believe, 2-5 or 3-6 at one point. And basically, they got in because the Titans completely collapsed. I think that really most years that Titans team would have gone over the line and got the playoffs. And I think that, so I think for me, they are my biggest candidate already next year to go from making the playoffs to not making the playoffs. We see it every year.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it depends what the Titans do, but I think even you look at the Colts and the Texans, I think the Colts, if they get the quarterback right, and the Texans have got a lot of a good bit of cap space as well. But I just think the Titans, I think if they take one good wide receiver in they've cut up a Woods, so they're a bit of cap hell, but I think that I don't think it'll be long before the Jags, for the Titans, I say, get back to win that division. Because I think Mike Vrabel's there. He's too good a head coach not to do well. And I think that we could see Malik Willis develop in year 2, or Ryan Tannehill could be good again. So I do think, as good as they've been, and I think there's still a chance they could win the division next year. I think they'll be close to winning it, if not winning it. But at the same time, I have to say, I think they got fortunate by the Titans' collapse.
Yeah, see, I sort of disagree there. I think the Jags are the only team in the AFC South that actually, are in a window where they could, contend in anything right now, because they've got a young quarterback who is coming along, and they've got cap room. The Titans, for example, they got players whose contracts are expiring. We saw that with AJ Brown. Last season they lost their best player other than Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, again, he himself has had injury concerns. Ryan Tannehill isn't the guy there. They showed that by drafting Malik Willis, so they're not confident in their quarterback. And I mean, yeah, I think the Jags probably will get in the playoffs next season. And again, they're not like any of the other contenders in the AFC, but they're probably the team in the AFC South that are in the best state right now. I'd say, like I said, the Titans are in a cap purge. That I see them as one of the teams that will probably go, and go after Caleb Williams next year. Because they've got a lot of young players in that team, and if they could trade away some, and there's a situation where they could probably get there. But again, I think that's probably why, again, they cut so many players, like so Robert Woods, Zach Cunningham, Taylor Lewan yesterday. But that's what I think personally. But yeah, again, with that division, it could go that anyone could win it. Same, we said that last year, it'll be the same this year as well. But obviously, before the offseason, some team could blow out of the water and go and get Aaron Rodgers for all you know. Like the Colts could just surprisingly do that. I won't put it past them. But again, Pat McAfee and everything as well there,
Yeah, that's a good link. I'm not thought of that. They could give someone their first round pick and get Aaron Rodgers somehow. But I think personally they're leading. They've done 5 years in a row of getting veteran quarterbacks. Look at likes of Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz and Rivers. I can see potentially them going. I think they could trade up and get number 1 overall pick. I can see them doing that. I can see them giving them. I can see them giving the Bears, maybe even giving them. I think they're giving one of their second choice or third choice receivers, maybe, or something like that. But I think that I can see that it can be the Colts trading up to number 1 and getting what I think will be CJ Stroud.
Wow. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, again, the Colts, they're a QB needy team, as are many of the teams in the NFL right now. And the only other thing in the AFC that we sort of really got wrong is that both have the Raiders at 10-7, and we both have the Jets at 6-11. And obviously, the Jets had a pretty good season in the end, and the Raiders had an awful season. If we're being real, really, and they're another team in transition. They're moving on from Derek Carr now, which I don't think really is the right thing to do. But because they're going to get, unless they get Aaron Rodgers, they're going to get a downgraded quarterback. The way it's going, because Garoppolo is no different to Derek Carr. I probably think Derek Carr is probably better than Jimmy Garoppolo in my opinion. But again, with the AFC, there are so many heavyweights at that conference that it's kind of easy to predict a little bit. The NFC is where this prediction, Andy, is absolutely awful because
Yeah.
I mean, I'll start with me first. My top two seeds didn't even make the playoffs. I had the Rams at 13-4 as number one seed, and I had the Packers at 12-5 as number two seed. Which I mean, look, going into the season, those teams,
Yeah.
the Packers look good even without without Devontae Adams. You still pick them to do well because the talent in the NFC is nothing compared to the AFC. We say it all the time, but it is the truth. And then it's Aaron Rodgers. You thought he'd be able to carry a team around on his back, and then I had the Bucks at 3, and we had the same 3 teams at the top 3 seeds, which I think going into the season you would pick the Rams, Packers, and Bucks. And now those are the consensus. A lot of people had those 3 teams. I mean, the Niners and Eagles in there as well, but there was a clear sort of 5 teams in everyone's playoff bracket. You had the Bucks as the number 1 seed, the Packers, then the Rams, and then you had Philadelphia winning the division. I had Dallas winning the division, in fact you had Dallas missing the playoffs completely at 9-8, and I had the Cowboys going 12-5 and the Eagles going 12-5 as well, but the Cowboys winning the division. The Niners going 12-5, so I was quite happy with that one year. The Niners missing the playoffs, which obviously making the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, that one's gonna haunt me.
And I mean, we both had the Vikings in the playoffs, and but the outskirts of the playoffs is where it gets interesting because we both had the Giants at 5-12. I had the Seahawks at 5-12, and you had the Seahawks at 3-14.
Oh God, that's worse than the 49ers one. That is terrible. That is awful.
I mean, yeah. Again, Seattle and the Giants, the two of them, they weren't expected to do well this year. Brian Daboll, coach of the year, or my coach of the year for a reason. Like he got made Daniel Jones good. He made Daniel Jones able to win a game in a moment. And Daniel Jones this year, his reports he wants $45 million a year, which
I couldn't believe when I saw it. That's just outrageous.
I know. And then Seattle, they're in an interesting situation now. Do they keep Geno Smith? They got number 5 overall pick. Do they go after CJ Stroud, or Bryce Young, or Will Levis? Or do they go for maybe Anthony Richardson at 20 in another pick? The Seahawks are an interesting team with a QB. Again, I expect they probably will keep Geno Smith, but again, anything could happen in this offseason. But one thing I will give you, Andy, is the fact that you predicted the Bears would have the number 1 overall pick.
That's right. Yeah, I think it was 2-15. I can see on the list.
Yeah, 2-15.
I wasn't far off the record either. I mean, I think I was so close to getting the Lions making the playoffs right, but I think I'm very happy with my Bears because I think most people had the Texans or maybe the Falcons having
the Texans.
But I think that it's I just didn't think they had anything going for them, and then we've all seen. I don't think they'll have the number 1 overall pick when it gets to the draft, but I think didn't have the worst record. I think that I was very confident of that happening, and thankfully it turned out to be true.
Yeah, so that's and I mean the Bears, the Ross is awful, but I actually quite like Justin Fields, and we'll get into what the Bears do with him in a minute. As for our Super Bowl predictions, I had the Bills beating the Rams, and you had the Bucks beating the Bills in the Super Bowl. So you both went for our top seeds against the Bills, or our top seed in the AFC versus top seed in the NFC, which it was in Kansas City and Philadelphia, but it wasn't the teams we picked. And I think the Bills probably could have got there, but the thing that hurt the Bills the most really was Von Miller going down, because that D-line was immense before, and it still was pretty good in the rest of the season, but it was nothing like it was the first couple of weeks with Von Miller there. And we saw it opening night. Von Miller made a difference like that again. In that Bills Rams game, and I made a big thing saying, we've got a big game on Thursday night, Bills Rams. I have a feeling we'll see that game again in the Super Bowl, and how wrong I was. As for individual awards, we both had Josh Allen for MVP, which again with both picking the Bills to be in the Super Bowl made sense, and he was up there. But I think for him this year, his turnovers let him down. He had more turnovers than he had in the years with both Brian Daboll and Ken Dorsey in Buffalo. I got Offensive Player of the Year right. I had Justin Jefferson. You had Mark Andrews, which I thought was an interesting one. But you said you had Baltimore going 13-4. You had really high on the Ravens going into the season. Defensive player of the year, we both went Rams players. I went Jalen Ramsey because I thought, if there's no standout pass rusher, we've seen corners like Stephon Gilmore win it in the past with 5 or 6 picks, not even with many. And you went Aaron Donald, which I think is an easy pick, but he had a bit of a down year this year, and obviously got hurt as well. Offensive Rookie of the Year, I also got right. Well, no, I didn't because it was Garrett Wilson, but a lot of people had Kenneth Walker, and bear in mind he didn't play till about week 5 or 6. I think I was pretty happy with that shout, to be fair. You had Romeo Dobbs. all the hype going into the season.
Oh, I know. I really built into the hype, and I think that he's definitely one for the future. But I think I really should have picked the other receiver they took. I think Watson would have been a better pick. But even then, I will say I think that I was shocked that Wilson won it. I thought it would have been Purdy or Walker, to be honest. And I think that we'll mention later on, but comeback player of the year, I think they got that wrong as well. But I was very surprised that they gave the award to Garrett Wilson, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, in the previous podcast, I picked him just because I was looking at Kenneth Walker's numbers, and they're quite similar they're pretty much identical to Tyler Algier, the other rookie on about for the Falcons. So there was that as well. And then defensive rookie of the year, we were not too far away. We had Aiden Hutchinson, which he was one of the best players. But Sauce Gardner had a great year, so you can't really take anything away from him. And comeback player of the year, it was just after Brian Robinson got shot, so I was like, okay, I'll take a punt here, see if we can get comeback player of the year. Obviously, he wasn't even nominated, and you went for Jameis Winston, who didn't have a great season. So, so yeah, we both had a major miss there. But yeah, just rounding off this segment, if you were to pick 3 surprises this season, so positive surprises, and 3 disappointments, team-wise, who would you pick?
I think surprise-wise teams, I think one for me, even though I predicted, I think still was a surprise to me, the Lions, how good they were, especially when they were 1-6 at one point this year. And I think the way they turned it around and almost made the playoffs for me, I loved. Other surprise teams, I'm trying to think who else. I mean, Miami surprised me a little bit, but I don't think that they were too interested. I think other surprise teams, I've got to say, I think the Eagles, to me, I know they were the 6th favourites to win it, and I didn't think they'd make it that far. So to make it all the way and be that good, I think they surprised me. And then a 13 team that surprised me, probably, I think any of the New York teams. I think that we saw the Giants improve massively in Daboll, and I really like the Daniel Jones uplift, and I think Saquon Barkley as well, his performances. And the Jets, I think if they had a good quarterback, they'd have made the playoffs and may even gone far. The disappointing teams for me, obviously, were the Rams, the Packers, and I'll probably give it as well to the Raiders.
Okay, yeah, I was quite similar. So my 3 surprises, I went for the Jags, I went for the Jets and the Giants. Because again, ultimately, the Jags and the Giants made the playoffs. The Jets won. They look really good this year, and if they had a quarterback, they would have been in the playoffs as well. Because the Jets, the rest of their team is really good. So this is why they're pursuing Aaron Rodgers right now. My 3 disappointments, again, I went for the Rams and the Packers like you, but because I was so high on the Broncos, I had to pick them as well because they just let me down. I mean, yeah, and the Russell Wilson trade again. I hope it works out, but I'm not picking them to go 12-5 next season.
I don't know. I think that the 2 games that are Hackett, they look much improved. And
Russell Wilson looked a lot better as well.
Yeah, and with Sean Payton there, who also Jameis Winston have a good year under Sean Payton. I think that they could be a team that I think they could easily make the playoffs. I think they could be a team that gets back into it this year.
Yeah, well, certainly not winning the division. Then maybe they can get in the playoffs, but I don't think they can beat Kansas City. Anyway, let's go into part 2 of the podcast now. Okay, so welcome back to the second part of this podcast. And in this part, we're going to move on from the 2022 season. So goodbye to that. Great season. It was probably one of my favourite to watch as a fan, actually, especially the Dolphins doing so well this season. It was great. But no, in this part of the podcast, we're going to be looking into the 2023 season, and we'll basically just looking at the off season, so free agency and the draft coming up in the next few months, and we'll start a free agency, which is at the end of February into the start of March. And the number 1 free agent, he's not going to probably test free agency, but it's Lamar Jackson, which obviously makes total sense. You've also got Derek Carr, who who was let go by the Raiders recently. You got top defensive player, probably Marcus Davenport or Javon Hargrave, which, Javon Hargrave was just obviously won the Super Bowl in Philadelphia as part of the great defensive line. There was also Fletcher Cox, who's also a free agent. So a lot of their defensive line are actually out of contract this year. So the Eagles did great to win when they could, because a lot of their players, the key standouts, are actually testing free agency. The same with CJ Gardner-Johnson as well. And Orlando Brown is the best offensive lineman in the free agent class as well. But really, there's been a lot better free agent classes, but it's an excellent year to get a quarterback. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I think that, I think last year was so disappointing in draft class wise. Looking at this year, there's only probably two really good quarterbacks in the draft, but I think you look at the free agency market. I mean, if Lamar Jackson's available, Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr. If the Giants don't pay Daniel Jones, you've got him as well. And I think you've just got a very good potential amount of Jimmy Garoppolo as well. And I think it's a lot of quarterbacks available. And I think there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. And I think it's going to be, I'm really intrigued this year to see who goes where, because I think it's really, really intriguing.
Well, you mentioned that, and there are a great variety of teams that actually do need a QB, or at least I expect to change teams, or go for a different QB in the next couple of months. So you've got the Texans, the Colts, both at the top of the draft. You've got the Falcons, the Panthers, the Seahawks potentially, the Giants, the Raiders, the Bucks, the Saints, the Jets, and the Commanders. And then you've got the likes of like the Titans, the Packers on the outside there as well, depending on if they can move the quarterback, which some of them will, some of them won't. And then, QB's available. You got, like I said, Lamar Jackson is going to test for free agency. He's probably going to get tagged by the Ravens, I expect, and then they'll go from there. But obviously, he wants a massive contract that I don't think actually the Ravens will give to him at the end of the day. You've got Derek Carr, who is a free agent, and he'll probably get quite a big contract from someone. You've got Aaron Rodgers potentially being available. I saw that today was the end of his darkness retreat that he's doing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of days with him. You've got Jimmy Garoppolo, who obviously isn't going to re-sign for the 49ers. You've got Geno Smith available. Will he go back to the Seahawks? So, there's questions there. He will get a better contract, but if there's a chance to upgrade, will he upgrade? Will they get a rookie with their their top pick? You've got Daniel Jones, who wants a massive contract from the Giants. Will he actually get that or not? Again, that's a thing. He could go somewhere else. You got Baker Mayfield available as well. Maybe he could in some means, same with Sam Darnold, Andy Dalton to free agent, Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, who will probably, all three of them will get at least a backup job. Then you got, will the Bears trade away Justin Fields and select the QB with the first pick? Will the Niners trade away Trey Lance, or will they trade away Brock Purdy? So there's those two which could be on the move. And you got the Jets and Zach Wilson. Will they trade him away? They're in the market for a QB, so Zach Wilson could be in the market. The same with Jordan Love. If the Packers pick Aaron Rodgers, I expect Jordan Love could be touted to teams. And then you got Ryan Tannehill as well, who the Titans could move on. I don't expect them to, but they are looking at QBs. They confirmed that with Malik Willis last year. But that is a lot of names there. I mean, you got what, 16, I think, I can count right. And that's a lot of QBs there, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I mean, you've also got quarterbacks in the draft. You got 5 who could go in the first round. You've got 2 or 3 good ones that you expect to be quite good. So you got Bryce Young out of Alabama. You got Will Levis out of Kentucky, CJ Stroud from Ohio State, Anthony Richardson from Florida, and then Tanner McKee from Stanford. Could all go in the first round. And I mean, ultimately, we've mentioned Lamar, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers. Is there anyone you can see definitely going to a team, or do you see a QB that fits a team more than other teams?
I do think Jets-wise, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is someone that I think is a good fit, purely because I think everyone goes on with the New York media. I think he'd be good for that, but also I think on a field point of view, he knows Robert Saleh well from the time of the 49ers. I think, even though obviously he was a DC rather than the OC, I do think that he could be a good fit there, because they prove that they don't need a quarterback who's elite. They just need a quarterback who's serviceable. And I think that getting him in there would do that. otherwise, I think Aaron Rodgers is a good fit because Nathaniel Hackett is now the OC there. So I probably see them going for Aaron Rodgers. Even if he's there just for 2 years, I think the Jets will take that. So I don't see Lamar Jackson moving. I think he'll stay. I think he'll get franchise tagged. I think he'll be there for at least one more year. I see the Giants paying Jones. I think he'll eventually go down to a lesser contract. And yeah, other moves, I think. I don't know why. For some reason, I can picture Derek Carr in a Buccaneers jersey. I think that is talk of, are they going to give Kyle Trask a go? And they could do for 1 year. I think if you mentioned in his speech to the Pro Bowl that he wants to go to a team where he wants to win. And I think if you've got a bit like what Brady had when he was deciding teams, if you've got a proposition of playing or throwing to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin with Fournette in the backfield, I think that that's a proposition that he would love. And I do think other than that, I know I did see the Saints going for him, but I don't think that's going to happen now. So yeah, and I think the Panthers will definitely get a QB, but I can't think who that would be. They may go see Matt Corral. You never know. They might give him a chance, but yeah, I think it's right now so hard to know. But I think what we will see, I think once one quarterback makes a move, I think that'll be a domino effect, and I think that will then result in a lot more changes. But yeah, Derek Carr's one that really fascinates me because I think he is a good quarterback. 2 seasons ago, he had a great year. The year they got to the playoffs, the Raiders. So I don't think he's a bad quarterback overnight. So his one really, really intrigues me as to what they do. And also from a Dolphins fans' point of view, what the Jets are going to do really intrigues / worries me. Because if I genuinely think if they get Aaron Rodgers, they win the division. I genuinely think that if they get a good, even a good quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr, I do think that. I think that their defense is so good, and they got obviously a good head coach in Robert Saleh, and I think they've got good offensive weapons, and I think that they could win the division. I think personally, if they had a good quarterback, so I think that would really spice up the AFC East with the Patriots. Thankfully, for once, lagging behind everyone else.
Yeah, and I mean, I sort of share an opinion. I think Lamar will. I'd probably say there's a 60% chance he stays in Baltimore. Whether he plays or not next year is a different story. And then there are teams like the Falcons who are really interested in trading for him, among others. And obviously Lamar Jackson, what you're getting there is a top 10 quarterback. I'm not really sure if he's top 5 like he was in his MVP season anymore, but he's still a great quarterback. And if you can keep him healthy, if you can have a great offensive, their own plays and everything, if you can get him some weapons which he's not had in Baltimore, he's only had running backs in his time he's been there, then I think you could really get something out of Lamar Jackson. So, but I think right now I'd probably say stays in Baltimore and get it figured out because I don't see who else they're going to go for really. Obviously they've changed scheme now, so they're moving away from the sort of Greg Roman, run heavy offensive. Maybe it isn't a chance to move on from Lamar, but I just don't see it personally. Derek Carr, that's an interesting one. For me, I think there are 2 places that are perfect for him. It is Carolina and the Jets. Because think about it, Carolina, really, they've actually got quite a good roster. It's the defense is young, it's hungry, it's really good. You've got an okay offensive line. I'd probably say it still needs improving, but it's not in the state that some offensive lines are in this league. You've got some nice receiving weapons. Towards the end of last year, they found a way in the run game as well. And obviously you've got Frank Reich in there as head coach. You got some great staff behind Frank Reich there. I think for Carolina, especially in a division that there's no clear team, there's no great quarterback either. Really, if Derek Carr goes to Carolina, I probably expect them to win a division next year. And as for the Jets, I mean, I'm not sure he'll do what the Jets say he's capable of doing and becoming a Hall of Fame quarterback with them, which I saw. I think it was Adam Schefter tweeted. That's what the Jets said Derek Carr could be with them. I don't think he'll go to that level, but you got to admit you had Derek Carr to that offense with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson and all the options they've got there. They've got an awesome offensive line. The Jets do. The Jets really, and the young defense they've got. The Jets. I mean, it's a big year for Robert Saleh because if they're not good, he'll probably get fired. But they've got everything there to make the playoffs next year, and that's why the Jets are so desperate to get a quarterback to play at least good level. because the best quarterback the Jets have had in the last 5-10 years is Josh McCown, and they you're being serious because Zach Wilson just wasn't the guy.
Yeah.
I don't, and
Terrible.
yeah, and really, yeah, the Jets they are going to become really scary if they can get someone like Derek Carr, because they can win 10 games. They almost won 10 games already. With their defense, they're playing so well. Sauce Gardner is going to be an awesome player, and yeah, I think those are the two options for Derek Carr. As for Aaron Rodgers, I really don't know. We talk about this a lot in uni because some of our mates are Packers fans and everything as well, so it's quite a good debate to have. And yeah, my mate Ollie, he sort of changes his mind all the time whether he wants to keep Rodgers or not, because Jordan Love showed quite a bit, actually, to be fair, in the time that he's had over the past season or so. And obviously Aaron Rodgers on the monster contract, and the Packers really can't actually move on from that either. So they're in a sticky situation where last season was probably a season they would have had no effect to move on from. This year he's like a 90 million cap hit or something like that. Which, I mean, any team that takes on that, in general, Aaron Rodgers is, it's a risk in that sense, trading for him. He had a down year this year. I really don't know what happens with Aaron Rodgers, to be honest with you. Mate, what about you?
I did actually an article on it this week. I think they have to move on from him. I think the time's come. All good things must come to the end, as they say. I think that it's just, I'm tired again every year of thinking Aaron Rodgers, is he going to stay? Is he not going to stay? I think there were times last year where he was the reason we were losing games. I think some of the throws he was making at times were really poor. And I'm fully aware that his defense did not play well, and he was missing his top weapon. But I mean, I saw signs towards the end of the year. They had a great run and almost made the playoffs from a seemingly impossible position. So I think there's definitely signs of maybe 1 year left and the Watson and Rodgers connection. But I just think that the time's come now. As you mentioned, Jordan Love, the one game he played more than a handful of snaps, he looked actually comfortable in the system. And I think, drafted him in 2020, so 3 years ago now. At some point, you're going to have to see what you've got on him. You can't keep, at some point, you've got to keep. I know the 49ers had Young as a backup for a long time, but I think at some point, you've got to just see what you've got. And I think at this point, he's 39, 38, and not every quarterback can do a Tom Brady. So I think for me, I think the time's come, move on from him, get some capital while you can from him, get maybe even a first round, if not a few second and thirds. And I think the time's come. Let him go, retire number 12 jersey, and give Jordan another go. And if it doesn't work out in 2 or 3 years, draft someone else. But I think, you have to give Jordan Love at some point a crack at the whip.
Okay, then, Andy. We'll end the podcast with a few questions. We're both going to answer them, and we'll look back in this in a couple of months' time and see how wrong we were. But so I got a couple of questions to ask, and we'll both answer them. The first one, we'll start with Aaron Rodgers. Will he A, retire, B, stay with the Packers, or C, go somewhere else? And if so, where will he go?
Go somewhere else. The Jets.
Wow. Okay. I think he will go to the Raiders.
Ooh,
I think that's another one that's been out there. I think the Raiders, again, they got two options, really. They got him and they got Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, he knows Josh McDaniels but from the time in New England. And yeah, for me, again, you've got Devontae Adams there. They've been recruiting him like hell over the past year, really, since Adams got there. And I mean, again, if it doesn't take much to trade for him, I think it's possible. The Raiders, again, cap-wise, they've got the third most cap room in the league this season. So they've got a bit there where you can accommodate for Rodgers. So yeah, I think it's possible. Again, I don't really know. He could retire. I mean, I'd probably say it's probably 30% retire, 30% stay with the Packers, 30%, go to another team. I think it's that case. I don't think anyone really knows what he's going to do. And yeah, that's my answer, really. As for the next one, what happens with Lamar Jackson?
Franchise tag.
And does he play on it, or?
I think he plays. I think he plays on it. A bit like Dak Prescott. I think that he will either... I think he will at some point. I can see him leaving after this year, so I can see him being there for one more year, playing for a bigger deal. But I think there'll be a case where if he has a really good season, they'll pay him what he wants. But if he has another injury hit season, I think they'll just go, you know what, we're not paying you what you want. We'll try someone else. And I think, I don't think they'll be in any position to get someone like Caleb Anderson. But at the same time, I think they could easily trade for someone, and I think that's what they'll do. I don't think they'll pay the man money if he has the third year in a row where he has injury problems.
Yeah, and I see what you mean there. I think he'll ultimately. I think I can see the Ravens signing him to a big deal. And what Lamar wants is more. He wants a fully guaranteed contract, and he wants more than Deshaun Watson got, which he should get more than Deshaun Watson has got. Let's be real. But
Without doubt.
Deshaun Watson contract has reset the NFL market because now every QB wants a fully guaranteed contract. Like they should be really, because a lot of other sports, every contract's fully guaranteed. We see it in football, for example. You get your weekly wage, and you get the payouts are massive if you get short of that contract. Is ultimately, I think Lamar. It's whether the league wants to make Lamar Jackson that first cornerstone piece to get that though, because then Joe Burrow is going to want it, then Justin Herbert's going to want it, and ultimately I think Herbert and Burrow this offseason are probably both going to get massive contracts, I expect, and that along with Lamar Jackson will reset the QB market for ages. But I think Lamar will. I think the Ravens have to give him basically because he's their project, and they didn't give up anything really to get him in the first place. Picking him at the end of that first round, obviously trading up. I think they could probably commit to him, which they haven't really done. In their whole time really, other than naming him the starter in the middle of that 2018 season. Okay, so what about the Bears? Do they keep Justin Fields and trade back? Do they keep Justin Fields and draft Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, number 1 overall? Or do they trade him away and pick Young, Stroud, Levis?
I think they trade down to pick number 4.
Yeah.
They take Will Anderson if he's there. If he's not there, they'll take Jalen Carter. I think that, we look at, mentioned the Raiders. I think they're 4th in the draft, I believe, this year. So I think that, with the Bears, so the Texans 2nd, the Colts 3rd, I think they'll both take quarterbacks. And I don't think they'll move. I think we may see the Raiders move up to number 1. But I think we'll see. I think this year will be the craziest drafting years for teams trading picks.
Yeah.
I don't believe the Bears are taking the first pick. I think they'll trade it away. But I think the Bears will trade down to either 3 or 4, and I think you can see a team like the Colts or the Raiders trading up to number 1 or pick. But I still see them taking either Will Anderson or Jalen Carter.
Okay, as for me, I agree with you. I think they keep Justin Fields and trade back. Now, that's what I would do anyway. If I would be surprised if they do trade away Fields, which I think is really stupid, really, because he last year, especially towards the end of the season with his legs, he showed that he can be a really dynamic, weapon, on the run game, but also his arm's pretty good as well. If he can just improve accuracy a little bit, then Justin Fields is going to be really good, and he can have a similar season to Jalen Hurts this year. As for the final question, it's which QB do you think will be drafted first, and then which QB would you draft first?
Certainly not. Will Levis. I think Will Levis is, for me, the biggest bust potential.
He's also got quite a high ceiling, to be fair, but
I think that someone like Anthony Richardson. I loved him being a Gators fan. He's someone I really hope he gets a good draft location. I can see him being at the Panthers. But in terms of, I would personally choose CJ Stroud, and I think the Texans take Young and the Colts take Stroud. It's whichever one of those teams has the higher pick. So I think that I can just picture Bryce Young in a Texans jersey, and I can just picture CJ Stroud in a Colts jersey. So I would take Stroud, and I think the way my draft will go, I think it will be the second pick. So I think it'll be Bryce Young who will be the first taken. But I would personally rather have CJ Stroud after watching, albeit a small sample size, watching some tape on him on both of his players. I would personally pick Stroud. I think he looks more NFL ready than Bryce Young.
It's an interesting one. For me, I'd go the QB I think will be drafted first. I honestly really wouldn't be surprised if it's Will Levis. I'm thinking.
Do you reckon?
I wouldn't pick him first, but I really wouldn't be surprised. Because a lot of people are down on CJ Stroud this year because he had a pretty big down year, and then against Georgia when it really mattered, he had an amazing game, and obviously almost won that game, but ultimately. For me, the CJ Stroud's falling a little bit because he had a poor season last year. Bryce Young, again, he's tiny. He's 5'10". He's the second smallest QB behind Kyler Murray, but he's also like 160 pounds or 70 pounds. So if you put this into perspective, look how small Tua looks. Bryce Young is 2 feet 2 inches smaller than Tua. He's also 30 pounds lighter than Tua, which is and obviously he's more mobile. He can get around. He's got a little bit of a stronger arm, but ultimately there is a concern. Obviously, he got hurt as well. Obviously, not to the extent of any other quarterback, that's had massive injury histories. But there is a worry there that he might get banged up. And a lot of the teams, they sort of will go for the stereotypical, 6'3", 6'4" pocket passer who massive strong arm, high upside, which I think Will Levis could have, which I think personally could happen. But personally, I would go for Bryce Young because he's my kind of quarterback. I love that kind of quarterback. I love Tua, I love Drew Brees, I love Russell Wilson, I love Kyler Murray. I love a small quarterback. It's so weird. I think that some of my favourite quarterbacks are all 6 foot and under. I love Baker Mayfield, another one. It's so odd, but I don't know. Maybe it's Mahomes isn't the tallest. He's one of my favourites as well. But for me, I'd go Bryce Young because he's got everything I'd want in a quarterback. But size is a real issue for some NFL teams who've seen that before. Baker and Lamar Jackson were the two QBs that a lot of people had sort of do so well in the NFL, and then Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, and Josh Allen were drafted for the three of them quite highly. Obviously, Baker went number 1 overall, but I don't know why the Browns did that. Really, that was a massive leap. But especially we saw the likes of Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, that those quarterbacks are desired. When the non-stereotypical QB isn't, and that's why I think it could be Levis, but I would pick Bryce Young.
Fair. I've got no problem with that. I think it's at some point maybe a bit of a coin flip. I think it's all about preference. I think
it's closing. It's definitely closing. It was Young at the top, but now it's sort of closing, which is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see Anthony Richardson taken first. I would love that.
I might imagine.
I mean, I say I'm in inverted commas a Gators fan. I don't watch them all the time, but I'd certainly this season just gone when Richardson was playing, I would certainly find the time to try and watch him because I thought he was really exciting. But at the same time, looking at his stats and what I did see him watching him play,
accuracy.
It's not comfortable viewing at times, but it's sort of, he will excite you as much as he will frustrate you. So I think for me, I think he'll go for the Panthers. I think that's almost like he's a bit like having Cam Newton again for the Panthers. So I hope he gets a good home because I want to see him do well in the NFL. But I would love it one year. I would love that. Even though I think he's definitely a best potential, I would love to see the trade reaction if they took Levis overall first. I think the Raiders was their history in drafts recently. We know when Mike Mayock and all that. I think I wouldn't put it past the Raiders to trade up and get Will Levis.
And I mean, you mentioned the Colts. That's the QB that the Colts desire. We've seen it over the last 5 or 6. They've gone from Luck to Brissett to Phillip Rivers to Matt Ryan. That is their kind of QB. They've not really gone away from that. Every single guy that they Carson Wentz. All of them, they're all 6'2", 6'3" plus, massive builds, strong arm, and that's what they go for. Again, the Raiders, whatever happens, I think it's going to be a shock. Whatever happens, really, and I think it will go away from what a lot of experts predict. As for Anthony Richardson, just to end the podcast, I think he's got immense upside. He's got the such a quick release. His arm talent is amazing. He's got the legs as well. He can move about. But the only thing that worries me is the accuracy. And it's like if you're completing 50% of your passes in college, then what are you gonna be like in the NFL? We saw someone like Jalen Hurts, for example. He's like a 70% completion percentage, 60% first couple of years at Bama before he went to Oklahoma. Jalen Hurts was like that, and then he came into the league. In the first couple of years, he was like a low 60, high 50 percent completion percentage. So as just a recent example, there's been many others as well. That obviously the windows in the NFL are a lot shorter, so for Anthony Richardson, that is a real worry for me. But if he goes somewhere where he's got a great offensive mind, then really I feel like he could be the best QB in this class if he goes to the right spot. But that's pretty much it for this podcast. Thank you for joining me, Andy. And let's just hope it's a good off season. I'm just hoping we get a lot of drama like we did last year with the Russell Wilson trade and the Tyreek Hill trade, and the first couple of days of free agency last year were absolutely insane. So
yeah, they were unbelievable, and I think that I do worry that a bit like the playoffs this year compared to last year. I do worry that we've set ourselves a high bar. I always go back to deadline day in Premier League, where everyone goes back thinking deadline day is going to be exactly like the year when Andy Carroll went and Torres went and all that.
And it's really boring.
Yeah, every year people say, "Oh, deadline day's here," and nothing ever happens apart from maybe once every 5 years. So my worry is that we're going to be thinking it's going to be like it was last year. But hopefully we see some moves, and I think personally we'll see more drama from draft picks. I mean, I can just really picture being a mad flurry of trade. I think the Bears will trade down, the Colts will move out, the Raiders will move out. But I think we'll see a lot of movement, I think, with draft positions. I think the draft position we're seeing right now, I think will be completely different come April, whatever it is, when the draft starts.
And I mean, it all starts next week with the NFL Combine. And mention the QBs just to finish as well. Every single QB at the top of the draft is attending the Combine. Whether what they'll do or not, in that week is a different story, but they're all going to be there. So there's going to be a great, you're going to get insider information, you're going to get measurements, you're going to get everything within the next week or so. So expect the mock drafts from like Daniel Jeremiah and Todd McShay and Mel Kiper to look completely different next week to what they look like right now, because when we get everything. But yeah, the Combine's next week. I'm going to be watching a lot of that next weekend as well. But yeah, thank you.
I got to say on that, sorry to interrupt you, I got to say that every year I'm tired of seeing these quarterbacks make these great throws with with no defense, no pass rush or anything. And I remember seeing Zach Wilson make an amazing throw, but he was throwing to an open receiver with no pass rush. And if I'll see that again when a quarterback makes a great throw in that kind of situation, and they're saying, "Oh, could he be drafted here?" I'm tired of seeing it. I want to see what they can do in other things. I don't want to see that. I think should be banned from the NFL Combine. That
wow.
Because who's thinking that's real life NFL, and it's just. I think Zach Wilson for me showed it that you cannot rely on that one specific drill, because again, how are you seeing good NFL quarterback by watching a guy without that pressure and with no defensive backs going up against a wide receiver in tight coverage? It's just completely fraudulent. I think that is the killer of mock drafts right there. And I think if you're listening to the show or watching it, however it is you're watching this episode, do not pay attention to the Combine, that specific drill I'm talking about. Stay away from it. Watch the defensive backs. Even watch the 40-yard rush. I mean, that's a bit fraudulent. John Ross, hello if you're listening. I think there's a lot. I find the Combine, a lot of it is a bit sort of fraudulent, but there's still some good bits. Now, I think for me, my favorite part is watching the wide receivers catch. I think I like watching how they're doing. I think CeeDee Lamb had a great Combine. I think that's what I like to see. I don't like seeing these quarterbacks make these stupid drills where he's got no one up against him. So yeah, that's my rant over.
I mean, ultimately, what you want to see in the Combine, or what the teams look for, is how big are they, how tall are they, how much weight have they put on since they were measured in college, how do they move, how high can they jump, how strong are they? That's what they really are looking for. Rather, can they, what's their footwork like? For example, for a DB, the footwork drill is really good for someone like a DB or a receiver. When for the quarterback, the drills that they have as a QB are kind of irrelevant. But it's just how quick are they? How can they move? That's what they look for, and that's what I look for as well. But I mean, I'm going to be watching it. I'm not really going to listen to you, mate. But I'm sure, I'm sure some people are. But no, thank you for joining me, mate. It's been great having you. That's all right, and we'll see you very soon. I'm not sure where it'll be, but it will be within the next couple of weeks. But yeah, thank you for listening to this episode of the SJMoores podcast, and bring on the 2023 NFL offseason.